Intro. Scream is a movie that changed the way horror really is seen. It's one of the rare slasher movies that feel like they don't get old with every new installment for the fans who still watch them. They still come out with the new ones, so it means it's successful at least. The whole idea of the Scream series slash franchise is about a murder mystery, which may not sound unique, but it is. It makes fun of the horror movie tropes that we always see in movies that people make for like horror films and horror fun. You know, the slasher stereotypes, but that's for later. But the movie is able to be fun and scary at the same time if you haven't seen it. But, so we're all on the same page, let's go over the story quickly so we know what happens in the movie. We start off with Casey as she's in her iconic home, probably ready to start a movie or something like that. She's cooking the old style of popcorn on her oven, and she gets a call from a mysterious person. Casey has to answer the classic questions on horror movies. And when she gets some of them wrong, her boyfriend gets murdered. You know, it happens. Then the person in the ghost face outfit is kind of creeping everyone out, so people start to grow nervous, as you know they would. We move characters to Sydney Prescott, who is dealing with the 1 year anniversary of her mother's death. After her dad leaves to travel for work, Sydney gets a call mocking her mother, and then is attacked by Ghostface in her home. She's able to run from it, but not before Billy, her boyfriend, sneaks through her window to comfort her. He drops a phone, which is rare back then, which makes Sydney suspicious of him. She calls the cops, and he's arrested by Dewey. Later, Sydney is harassed by all the press, as the celebrities are, and Gail, who wrote a book on Sydney's mother, specifically tries to get info from her. Sydney gets one more call from the killer, even though she's at her friend's house named Tatum. Then the phone calls are traced to Sydney's dad. Shocker, hold your gasps. But Billy says his mother being missing is like Sydney's mom being dead. Also, everyone in Woodsboro, which is the town, their high school, doesn't have to go to class because they're suspended due to murder. Then the principal gets killed, so who knows how long the classes are suspended for. Then Stu is like, I'ma throw a party, dudes, at my house, because the classes are suspended, and that's what you do in a classic scenario like this. This causes everyone in the school to go to the party somehow, but under the secret, but careful watch of Dewey and Gail. They're only there in case the killer returns, so they can get it on picture in the news. But they aren't stalkers or anything. Then Tatum gets murdered by Ghostface after her head gets crushed by a garage door. Then we get an explanation of the rules of horror from Randy, which we see all of them being broken clearly. Guys, the principal is dead, yells one of the people, and everyone wants to see a dead body in this movie for some reason. So they all run out of the house to see it. Billy and Sydney then kind of get a little primal and then are attacked by Ghostface. Billy is stabbed, but Sydney is able to escape. Whoa, luckily. Kenny, who is the camera guy for Gail, is killed, but Dewey is stabbed in the back. Literally. Gail just passes out because of the car crash after all the adrenaline goes through her. Then Sydney locks Stu and Randy out, as one of them has to be the killer. They both swear it wasn't them, but later Billy lets Randy in. JK lol, it was a trick. Randy gets shot in the shoulder. Now we know the killers are Billy and Stu. It's the two killer special. Billy tells Sydney they killed her mother because her affair with his father caused his mother to abandon him. That's a lot of lines to draw. They also said they framed Sydney's father and were going to stab each other to make them look like survivors, essentially. They do that, but then Gail comes back and Billy and Stu go after them. Stu dies by a TV on his head, assumingly, and Billy tries to kill Sydney. Randy and Dewey are also found to be alive, as Sydney actually puts Billy down like a dog afterwards because he got up and boo. It's scary. We see the sun as everyone who's alive is still alive, and just walking out of a murder scene. Then we cut to the iconic credit. Whoa. In the movie, the rules of horror are mentioned. Those rules being you may not survive if you go primal with someone, you do drugs or drink alcohol, you say, "I'll be right back," or "Hello?" or "Who's there?" Overall, these are the rules that are at play and are established throughout the movie, which is different from a bunch of other horror movies. For example, in a movie like Friday the 13th or Halloween, two movies that came out before this one, you'll never hear a set of rules on how to survive the night. Surviving the night is never one consistent plan in these movies. It's just, I'll rely on instincts, but I just hope I can survive. Which makes sense in some way, but it really is whatever way they can just survive, and the movie is scary. Back in the day of horror movies, they were more focused on scares, but the problem with trying to scare people is they get used to it. Shocker. Why do you think scary games become less scary over time? Because it's an effect, and an effect can wear off over time, especially if you're expecting to be scared. If you're going to a horror movie in modern day, you have to explain to yourself why. Because why? But also, what do you expect from like a horror movie now? Probably a formulaic movie or a jump scare movie. Either is fine, it's whatever. But what does this have to do with the established rules? Simple. The fact that the rules symbolized something that was common in movies. The idea of tropes and common themes throughout the movie and the genre. I mean, tropes are pretty common in these types of movies. I mean, that's just all over the place. Tropes, as defined in the message class I had to take, is a significant or recurrent theme. It's those things that you usually realize and scoff at when they're actually in movies, because you can't believe they're in the movie. Every genre of movie is filled with these, but horror movies are the one that get the most flack for it, because let's be honest, everyone tries to make a horror movie once in their life. Even in my film classes, people tried to make horror movies. It's the easy, low-budget genre you can make that seems semi-good no matter what you do. It's not usually good, but to actually call out the tropes that's in all these movies, we first need to actually know them. You can't call something out without noticing it. When we look at horror movies, let's look at slashers, since that's the genre Scream is in. You may think of a lot of tropes, depending on how many horror movies you've seen. But the main ones are that there's like a lot of kills in them. That's the whole point. The characters are stupid, and there will be jump scares with loud, obnoxious noises behind them. These make sense, as usually these are all the things that scare people or can shock them and make them gasp in a theater. That's what slasher films are mainly trying to do, after all. But these are all formed in your brain, as you know these are going to happen. You know that some characters will just fall into the killer's trap and be killed, or that some people may die in the stupidest ways. That's the idea of the old slasher movies, trying to pick people off one by one until there's the final girl or just a few people left. Never is it nobody left. That's rarely ever the case. And if it is, well, I guess they broke that rule. But we have these tropes that we know, which causes us to feel like we know what's going to happen. Movies are boring if you know the general idea of what's going to happen. That's why we hate spoilers. But when you have these tropes in mind, it's a little different from knowing what happens. You only have a vague idea of what's going to happen. You have these expectations for a movie, and usually you can be like, oh, I know this movie might be bad because of this and that. And it makes you feel like you've seen the movie before. If a movie can't distinguish itself from any other movie in that genre, then what is the point of it and what makes it special and not some cash grab by a big studio? It can't be this predictable mess, like Until Dawn, for example. And usually, when you look at it and you just feel like you're seeing slop, you'll grow confident with the story. Usually, when you watch a movie, for the first time, you shouldn't know how things are going to go. You're trying to see a new experience, and so you wouldn't want to be like, hey, I've seen this before. Because why would you? Honestly, why would you? You should only say that if you've seen the movie before and are rewatching it, clearly. Now, that we have the reasons horror movies were seen as predictable, we can see the idea of how Scream was different. Because there's a reason it was so successful, and that's because of how it turned these ideas of expectations and tropes right on their head. It really starts with the cold opening of the movie. The part was Drew Barrymore, and the iconic scene that they like to do in movie parodies of this. This is because background, Drew Barrymore was a child star, so usually there's this aura around people who are child stars and become famous through other things. Like in this case, romance movies and such, for example. I'm guessing a lot of you either grew up on Disney or Nick as kids. The late 2000s, early 2010s era of TV. For this, we need to look at a few people and how we see them. We see people differently as we mature and get older, but they also mature and how you see them changes. How did you see Ariana Grande back then? Probably different back then compared to now, just because her image grew and people grow up. The other one, that's a good example, is Jeanette McCurdy. She's also from Nick, but you see her not too much, so her image sticks with you differently. You know her from things like iCarly and Sam and Cat, maybe, but what does this have to do with Scream and Drew Barrymore? Back then, in the early to mid-90s, she was seen as more of a child star, similar to them, as she didn't have too many breakout roles until this movie. Basically, what the opening scene was able to do is take this idea that people had of a person and twist it to fit a more scary narrative, like in the movie. This and the long shots they used to build suspense also help the opening scene. But also, there was this big star in a horror movie, so most people thought she would be the main character. Well, she was, but then she wasn't, since she's dead. That's how you make new rules and expectations for people. The people who would have gone into the theater and have expected to just see Drew Barrymore survive the movie and do all those tropes. That's what they were expecting, probably. If you instantly set new rules, people will actually pay attention to the movie. It's not another movie where you can just ignore it and go on your phone. Or really, back in the 90s, just whoever, make out with whoever you swindled into seeing this movie with you. It's a movie that you don't know what's going to happen, and that's when movies are the most interesting. But the cold opening makes it seem like anything could happen. If Casey can be murdered, and she was the one mainly in the trailers, and the one mainly being promoted, you kind of think, who else can be murdered? Can the main character be murdered as well? And how long will they last for? Now, You actually have to pay attention to see what happens. And also for clues, since guess what? It's a murder mystery, unless like you already know because you saw the story summary. You have to actually pay attention. And of course, the rules, as mentioned before, kind of challenge this idea that these characters don't know what will happen. It's a meta commentary. That's a big fancy word that people like to use on the horror genre, which adds a little fun to the movie. It's good to make fun of the things that are predictable and to be like, hey, that's kind of stupid. And also play on that fact. That's stupid. But it's good because usually satirical horror movies didn't get too much recognition, but Scream made it really prevalent. This is good because it did inspire other movies to do something similar, like Final Destination and some of the Fear Street movies. It did this in the fact that these movies now contest the idea of death in their opening sequence, or just how they handle a cold opening, instead of like whatever happened in the other movies, where it was like menacing and predictable in a way, like setting up. But it also inspired movies like I Know What You Did Last Summer, because even though that movie's satire isn't directly on the nose like Scream's was, it still uses it a lot. In a genre where seriousness is what brought you to fame, but also to its creativity drought, satire was the only way that you could help revive the genre to new heights. Because now a lot of horror movies don't take themselves as seriously as they did back in pre-Scream days. But if this is an issue, it only really matters if people get tired of it rather than oversaturation. But that's a modern issue and not a 90s issue, so I will not talk about it now. But satire did kind of introduce a new way of making horror movies. Just because, like, now you don't have to take stuff too seriously. Of course, you still have to do some seriousness, but not full seriousness. But just the fact that you can have fun with horror movies and you don't have to sit there like a film critic and critique a movie really did change the way people approached like horror movies and stuff. It's a new way of looking at it. Let's put it like that. But all the sounds and stuff adds to it. So overall, the way that horror movies are now are really just because Scream did this. Like, if you see a satirical movie, it wasn't like directly based off of Scream, but Scream opened like the window to this. I'm not going to glaze like the movie too much, like a lot, but I will say what it did. It made like the horror scene large since it was a box office hit, but it did a lot too. I'm not going to say all of them because that's a lot, but you can do your own research for that one if you actually are interested. The music in Scream is some of the music you would expect in a horror movie. It's nothing out of the ordinary too much. It's the orchestral and scary sounds that you usually hear in slashers and the jump scare noises you're used to, but not like as obnoxious. It's still good because it has the good chase music that usually appears in these types of movies. It fits the mood well. It also makes the atmosphere more spooky. The music fits well with actually building suspense, with long, drawn out chords sometimes. It's good with making you feel on edge, especially in a movie that already does that well. It does the job where it makes the movie more scary to watch and puts you off ease. You don't feel comfortable when the music plays, most likely, which is what they wanted, I can only guess. When music is made haunted, they want you to feel like you're haunted, so if that's what happened, they did their job. Congrats to them, give them a round of applause. But it works because of how usually it is slow and quiet, but then it can get loud as well when it plays during something like a chase. And that's why it kind of still holds up today, because it's still kind of generally the same. As for the numbers, the movie was able to do pretty good for itself, I would say. It had a 14 to 15 million dollar budget and made 173 million dollars in the box office, which means it actually made profit. Pop the confetti, everyone. It made money. But if a movie makes a lot of money, that doesn't mean it's good or not. So, let's quickly see what the reviewers said, and let's see the review scores, which on Rotten Tomatoes, it got a 78%, which is similar to the 7.4 out of 10 it got on IMDb, and the 4 out of 5 it got on Letterboxd, or it currently has. But the lowest score comes from Metacritic, as it usually does, as on there it has a 66 out of 100, which is good because they're too strict there. But overall, review scores are good for the movie. Let's go. This is hype. Overall, Scream is a good intro horror movie for if you're watching the classic franchises, since it is considered a classic horror movie. But if you don't know the tropes of horror, you may not fully get the things it's critiquing, and it may not be a full experience, but you can still watch it. The best way to watch the movie is to be completely blind, since it is a murder mystery movie. That's the best way to go into any movie that's a murder mystery, and that's how you get the best experience with this one. But I like it the most, and I think it's the best horror movie I've seen personally. It's my favorite. So I'll give it a high score, which is a rare sight. So I'll give it a 10 out of 10. I would say in my books, it's above Interstellar. But form your own opinion, because you're a person too. And comment your opinion below if you want to. I'm not going to force you to do that. But please like and subscribe. Pretty please.